we are talking about the rookies that we think could break out as fantasy stars. Last year, we saw guys like Puka Nacua, Sam Laporta, Devon Achan, and those were not necessarily the top drafted rookies from their class. We've talked so much about a lot of the obvious guys: Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, the first round wide receivers like Marvin Harrison, the top running backs like Jonathan Brooks. But we want to talk about some rookies that you probably draft with one of, if not the last pick in your draft. These are the guys that can absolutely change your fantasy season, alter everything you've done. Now, what happens is we want to find guys, Dave, and I think you agree with me, that can get on the field early, right? Because a lot of times if you draft a player like this and you say, okay, well, that's a guy that can help me, in week 11 or in the playoffs, well, there's a pretty good chance you're dropping that player at the very first chance you get for someone on waivers. So if you can get a player that can actually contribute in week one, I think that's a big factor. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the theme that I went with all of these guys. Like, yeah, Jonathan Brooks could be that late season hammer. And we've talked about Jonathan Brooks a ton, and we've talked about Jaden Daniels a ton. But I think you can find a huge edge if you're able to hit those late round rookies that are able to put it together. Like you've already mentioned some of the guys, but like last year, if you drafted Puka Nacua, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, chances are you were in the playoffs and potentially winning your league because you were getting, elite production out of a guy that you drafted in the very final rounds of your draft.
Yeah, I think there's even so much more value to be had with guys like this, and you laid it out pretty well there, Dave. And we're each going to talk about three rookies that we think have this potential to not only just be contributors early in the season, but end up being those league-winning guys. So why don't you start us off here, Dave? The first guy that you want to talk about is Jaylen Wright, running back for the Miami Dolphins.
Man, I feel like I'm just recycling everything I said last offseason about why I like Devon Achan, but they drafted a running back who is just tailor made for the Dolphins offense. And
Yeah.
last year we were saying it about Devon Achan. Hey, they got this guy who can just put the burners on and score from anywhere on the field. And we saw him do that time and time again last offseason. Well, guess what? They're not trying to rewrite the script here. I mean, they did exactly what they did last offseason. They drafted one of the fastest guys with breakaway speed in the draft, and that's what I expect Jaylen Wright to do this year. 4.38 40-yard dash. He's got a 95th percentile burst score, averaged 7.4 yards per carry last season, was third in all of the NCAA in breakaway run rate last year. So again, they know what they want on this team. They want to make huge holes for the running backs that can break away and score touchdowns from anywhere on the field. And Raheem Mostert, he can do that, but he's going into his age 32 season. Who knows what he's got left in the tank? Devon Achan, for as good as he looked, is looking like a guy that you don't want to give more than like 12 touches per game to. I don't want to put the injury prone label on him yet, but he got nicked up quite a bit last year. So I think what we're going to see is them just kind of alternating between Jaylen Wright and Devon Achan, try to keeping their touches limited, but they both have that ability to score from anywhere on the field. So even in a limited workload, they can still give you elite fantasy production. I think immediately when we see Jaylen Wright step on the field, just like Devon Achan was last year, we're going to see him be an immediate contributor and an elite fantasy scorer.
So much was made about Jaylen Wright's prospect profile that he had so many of these big runs and he was able to do so much against defensive boxes that really were not stacked because of how much Tennessee and the Josh Heupel offense really spreads things out. And Jaylen Wright went against the lightest fronts in college football, essentially. Well, guess what? Like you said, Dave, perfect fit. He goes to the Miami Dolphins that are also going to be spreading out teams and going up against light boxes up front. And this is going to get him out in space. I love this. I think that where most people will probably have their worries is the fact that it is a three-headed monster. But if there's an offense where we see that running backs can make it work and where you're only an injury away from really big fantasy success, it's the Miami Dolphins. And Jaylen Wright, I think, is an awesome choice to start this off.
And I just want to build on that real quickly, talk about it. The numbers back it up, which so often your hunches are backed up by numbers, Alfredo. And average defenders in the box last year for Devon Achan, 6.7. Average defenders in the box was 47th among all running backs. The light front carry rate, meaning like there weren't a lot of defenders in the box, 31st among running backs. Stacked front carry rate on just 11% of Devon Achan's touches last year was 48th lowest among running backs. So throwing a lot of numbers out there, but what I'm saying is when defenses have to worry about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle getting deep, they can't afford to stack the front. And that's why you see these wide open. Like, how many times did you see Devon Achane just score from 50 yards out untouched because the defenses are so concerned about getting beat? So we're going to see the same type of thing for Jaylen Wright this year. It's just such a good skill set for the offense that they're running in Miami.
I don't like the word hunches. Hunches sounds like it's a guess. Let's call them observations.
Yes,
By
and
the way,
your observations I can prove to be backed by data, which is just
there
a
we go. That's
beautiful, beautiful thing.
everyone needs a Dave Kluge who can sit there and support you and back you with data. We all need that. Now, I want to remind everybody there are tons of ways to enjoy this show and enjoy content from Dave and I, whether it's articles on Football Guys website or our rankings that we have as well on the website. We've got our show on both YouTube and in podcast form. And so if you're listening on the podcast, go check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/at Football Guys Fantasy. Don't forget the at. I did that the first time. And if you're already watching us on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Maybe one of these rookies you absolutely love, or maybe there's someone that we missed that we should have talked about. Be sure to share this video with your friends. Keep growing our audience and getting that fantasy football goodness out there to everyone. And if you are listening on the podcast, please, once you finish this episode, leave us a review. 5 stars is preferred, and let us know what you like about the show and maybe what you would like to see going forward. All right, Dave. I'm going to get to my first breakout rookie who, once again, we talk about these guys being super late picks. They're essentially free. I want to talk about Ricky Pearsall, a guy who I have really, really liked prior to the draft. I remember being shocked and happy and elated when he was drafted in round 1 by the San
Mhm.
Francisco 49ers. And I'm just going to make it really simple here. Betting on talent is never a bad thing. Betting on talent in a great offense is even better. And so what we're really looking for here is opportunity. We've got a guy already in Pearsall who is one of the best route runners in the class, some of the best hands in the class, top 5% in burst and agility scores. So we know he's a great athlete. He's got all the tools to make it work. Now what we need is the opportunity. So far in 49ers OTAs, there's been no Brandon Ayuk, which we do expect him to show up later, and no Jawan Jennings at OTAs, who's also kind of got a little bit of a contract dispute. And so chemistry is starting to build between Ricky Pearsall and Brock Purdy. And Purdy's already talked about this. He's been praising Pearsall for learning the playbook pretty quick, getting open in practice, not dropping anything. And we've kind of already seen this with Ricky Pearsall in college, where he played with 3 different quarterbacks, 3 different offensive systems. He's going to be able to pick this up pretty quickly. He's got the ability to play inside or outside, which is actually big in this offense. You need to know how to do this because I know what a lot of people might say is that the Niners don't run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. They really don't. I think they run it at the second lowest rate in the NFL. So I get that argument against this, but what you want is a guy that has versatility to play in the slot if necessary and play outside. And that versatility is going to get Pearsall on the field. Now, one of the things that I think that we can say the quiet part out loud here, those Niners weapons, they get injured. And I'm not hoping for that. I am not trying to predict that. But right now, Pearsall is likely 5th on the team in targets if we're doing that, right? You've got Ayuk, CMC, Debo, and Kittle. Debo and Kittle have played 1 full season in each of their careers. That's it. McCaffrey has had his own injury troubles in the past. Really, the only guy you're looking at here who hasn't had a whole lot of health problems, and
Don't say it. Don't say it.
knock on wood, hope it doesn't happen, is the other receiver who I'm not going to say his name,
Thank
treating him
you.
like Voldemort right now. But my thought is this, okay? We've got a talented guy on a very good offense. Opportunity can be there in an offense that oftentimes has a revolving door of weapons. Those top 4 weapons were all fantasy stars last season. If I can draft the 5th guy, the next man up, and get some of that fantasy goodness as my last pick in fantasy drafts, I love that. It's minimal risk for a guy that has tremendous upside. Dave, I don't know what you think about Ricky Pearsall, but I love him.
I'm a big fan of him, and I wrote his, the instant reaction article on draft night when a lot of us were surprised that he went round 1. And what I like about Pearsall specifically is his versatility kind of gives him multiple opportunities to be valuable this year. It's not like he needs this to happen to be valuable. If anybody goes down with an injury, whether it's McCaffrey, Debo, or Ayuk, his versatile skill set kind of sets him up to be the beneficiary there. Like he is kind of, if you look at his skill set, he's kind of in between what Debo can do and what IU can do. Like he can win deep downfield and make contested catches the way IU can. He could also make plays after the catch on manufactured sweeps and screens the way that Debo can. So if either of these guys misses any time, he can immediately slot in as the wide receiver too. But what I really like about Ricky Pearsall too is that he blocks. And you're
Yep.
probably saying, I'm not in a point per block leave, Dave. Shut up. I don't care about his blocking. But that's what gets you on the field. And especially when you're on a team like the San Francisco 49ers, where everybody is so infatuated with getting yards after the catch, having those receivers that can block is what gets you snaps. The same way it got Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods to be, integral parts of the Rams offense. And then in steps Puka Nacua, a fantastic blocker. And he is in a full-time role week one because of that blocking ability. We can see Ricky Pearsall, I don't want to say anybody's this year's Puka Nacua, but
Yeah.
man, there are a lot of shades in
Yeah.
what Ricky Pearsall can do and what Puka Nacua can do.
I was I was tiptoeing the line as to whether I wanted to say that, but if there is a guy that could do it in an offense that could provide it, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And even to kind of circle back to the whole thing of like, there's going to be a lot of target competition, sure, but like you said, even without a glaring opportunity of someone going down with injury, you don't draft a guy in the first round to not use him.
Mhm.
Like we don't see that. Whenever we do see a guy in the first round who maybe doesn't get on the field a lot, let's say like a Traylon Burks or a Quentin Johnston, it's these guys who need to be more refined route runners. It's these big potential guys that have athleticism that haven't quite refined themselves. Ricky Pearsall is a finished package for the NFL. So I think we're going to see him on the field just plenty.
And then also, like, we have talked about it so much, like, are one of these guys getting traded, Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel? Like, the 49ers still need to figure something out. They're still
Mhm.
$30 million over the cap. So a lot of people said, well, they didn't get traded during the draft, so they're not going to get traded. There's still a lot of offseason left. So this is a guy right now that you're drafting for super late. But if news breaks later this afternoon that Debo Samuel gets traded to Buffalo or wherever, all of a sudden Ricky Pearsall is jumping so high in ADP. The concerns right now are about his target competition, but that can easily change between now and week one.
If something like that happens, does he jump into maybe
I think he's
top
going ahead of
3
Keon
rookie?
Coleman. Yeah, I think he's
Yeah, like,
I'd
does
take
he
him
go
ahead
ahead
of
of Roma
yeah,
Dunze?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only guys that I would even put ahead of him are going to be Neighbors and Harrison amongst
Right,
the rookies.
right.
That's what a world. What a world to live in if that happens. All right, let's go to the next guy here that you have as a rookie breakout, and it's Malachi Corley, the Yak God that he titled himself out of college. Coming out of Western Kentucky, the Jets were really happy to make this pick. Talk to us about Malachi Corley. It could potentially be another Randall Cobb for Aaron Rodgers.
You must have read my show notes because that's exactly what I
Oh,
said. I see shades of Randall Cobb in his game, and it's hard not to get excited about the possibility that he is Aaron Rodgers' new Randall Cobb. You also talked about how excited everybody was in New York when they drafted him. If you haven't seen that clip, go ahead and check it out. It's a funny little um, clip that the New York Jets social media team edited where it shows like they are trying aggressively to trade up to get Malachi Corley, like trying, and they're on the phone and they want to move up and get their guy, and then they just get lucky enough that he falls into their lap. He has some concerns, admittedly, and I am a sucker for these guys. And we've talked about it before, Alfredo. I love these guys that can make plays after the catch, that are very physical. They don't always pan out in the NFL, but when they do, they end up panning out and being very good. And the thing is, Malachi Corley wasn't a first round pick, so we're not looking at some exorbitant draft cost on him. You can get him at the very end of your draft, and if he doesn't pan out, you cut him, you bring on a running back or whatever it may be. But he was fifth in the NCAA in yards after contact per attempt last year. He was 14th in yards per route run. He was an efficient guy, even though he doesn't run the full route tree and gets super deep downfield. But right now, trying to look at what this Jets offense is going to look like, you got to imagine Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be playing the ball that we saw him playing 8 years ago, where he's running bootlegs and he's getting outside of the pocket and he's extending plays with his legs. At 40 something years old, coming off of a torn Achilles, he's probably going to be looking to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. And those
yes.
balls are likely going to Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, and then Malachi Corley as a third option in the passing game. So easy to get excited about the upside for him. And because he's so cheap, if he doesn't pan out, you can quickly move on from him. He's not a guy, if you draft Roma Dunze and Roma Dunze isn't working out for the first few weeks, you don't want to be that guy that drafted or that Justin Jefferson his rookie season. Like that guy is going to have some insulated value that you're going to want to hold on to. Malachi Corley being a later pick, if it doesn't work out, you can just simply move on.
Yeah, I mean, you already mentioned the thing of Aaron Rodgers wanting to get the ball out of his hands quickly, and that works so well for a guy like Malachi Corley. The other thing here to think about too is Mike Williams is the other wide receiver on this team, and once again, it's we're not trying to predict injury, but it's a guy that we really don't see finish a lot of seasons. So Malachi Corley's role could be very, very big in this offense. It's something that is there. There's a world, like we like to say.
And I mean, I hate to use the who else is there argument, but like, what? Mike Williams coming off an ACL? I'm not that concerned about him. Alan Lazard has just
Mhm.
been a bust at this point in
I
his
didn't even know
career.
that he was still on the team. I honestly thought he
Exactly.
was on his way out.
Yeah. Xavier Gibson, Jason Brownlee, like the way it looks right now, assuming Mike Williams is back and healthy week one, Malachi Corley is still going to be on the field for the majority of snaps. So really hard not to get excited about his ceiling.
Yeah, the anxiety that I saw on Joe Douglas's face, hoping Malachi Corley was there for them, was the same anxiety I had watching Baby Reindeer. It was rough. All right, let me get to my next guy. I want to talk about Jermaine Burton, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is a dude that was really, really talented coming out of Alabama. I loved everything that I saw on film for him. Reception Perception agrees. Go check that out from Matt Harmon. This is a guy who I thought was very similar to Ricky Pearsall in that he can win at all levels of the field. He can work inside, work outside. The only difference here was that there were character concerns with Jermaine Burton. And that's something, if you want to go look that up, you absolutely can. And we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the fantasy prospects of this player. And, talent wise, he's in the same echelon as Ricky Pearsall and Lad McConkey. And he ends up on a good situation and a good roster with the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow. And Burton has worked actually quite a bit with former Bengals wide receiver TJ Hushmanzada. And I think that's something pretty interesting just to take note of some of those intangible things, the narratives that you like to look at from the outside. There's already some of the T. Higgins drama. I think that all works out fine. Him not being at OTAs. And even if nothing happens there, Tyler Boyd is gone. And Jermaine Burton was the first guy mentioned by head coach Zach Taylor when talking about who was going to go in and fill that role. And they took Jermaine Burton in the third round this year. So this is a guy I think he plugs in pretty easily. He can play inside. He can play outside. Jamar Chase has actually talked about wanting to play in the slot a little bit more and moving around a bit more, the same way that he's seen CeeDee Lamb do. So I would not be surprised if we see Jermaine Burton out on the field quite a bit. The Bengals run more three wide receiver sets than any other team in the league, or they may be top two at very worst case scenario. Dave, I know you're already looking that up because you love to do that, but T. Higgins missed 5 games last year. Jamar Chase missed time 2 years ago. He's also one of those guys that kind of becomes a really good wide receiver handcuff, the same way we looked at Josh Palmer for years with the Chargers. So
Mm.
I do see a lot of upside here with Jermaine Burton. And even if that upside never comes to fruition, there's still actually a pretty good floor on an offense that just scores points, passes the ball, and passes the ball deep downfield. Everything kind of just fits perfectly with Burton and the Bengals.
Yeah, and we've been looking for years, like who's the wide receiver 3 on the Bengals, and are they gonna be able to step up? And saw little flashes from Andrei Josevich and a little bit from Trent Irwin here and Charlie Jones, but I think they finally have their guy that they can count on. Like, they aren't asking some round 6 pick to step up and be a contributor. They went out and they got Jermaine Burton this year, who we know fits that role. Like, his skill set is very different than what Jamar Chase does and very different than what T. Higgins does, and he'll profile be that slot guy. So, yeah, I like this a lot. I'm excited for the Bengals this year, just in general. I think that bringing in Zach Moss is a pretty lateral move from Joe Mixon, but opens up extra opportunities for Chase Brown. They've got a lot of young, talented players that could make a difference this year. Also, I have to ask: is there a Nine Inch Nails concert happening outside your window right now? What is that noise that I'm picking up?
No, we've got the lawn guys who love to only be here when I'm recording. It's
Uh,
it's just fantastic.
I thought that was
Thank you.
Trent Reznor testing out his new album for
I
the people of Miami.
don't know who Trent Reznor is, but seems like he's a very important fella. Yeah, I was wondering if you could hear that. Sorry for all those of you listening.
Just
I
a
hope
little
it's not
bit.
too bad.
It's not terrible, but I'm picking it up in my headphones.
Oh well, that's not awesome. That's good to learn about an hour into the recording. Dave, let's move on to your third and final rookie that you feel could break out here. another guy who, honestly, I don't even think he'll get drafted. I think he's going to be one of those priority waiver wire guys, or if you do want to get him as your last pick, go for it. But I'm very intrigued by Tyrone Tracy, running back for the New York Giants.
Yeah, and you know who else was drafted last year? Kyron Williams and Zamir White and Ty Chandler and a lot of guys that went on to have pretty big seasons. Tyrone Tracy, big fan of him. He was a wide receiver, converted running back, so we know he's going to have that pass catching upside. The big concern with Tracy is his age, but for redraft and best ball, I don't care. Like, sure, in dynasty, you want to knock him down a tier or two because he's older, fine. But I could care less for the 2024 outlook. Eighth in the NCAA in yards after contact per attempt last year, 10th highest in their elusive rating. So this is a guy who can make big plays, has the ability to break tackles. He's got the size to be a 3 down back, and the little bit of concern here, of course, is Devin Singletary and Brian Dable's infatuation with Devin Singletary. We saw it in Buffalo. We saw them go out and get him this offseason. But Devin Singletary, when you look, he really isn't a great running back. Like he's undersized, he's relatively unathletic. He's never really done anything throughout his career to make us think that he is a good running back. And if you put Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary side by side, Tyrone Tracy might just be able to beat him out for the RB1 role. But at worst, he's going to have some contingent upside if Singletary goes down. And well, I'm not crazy about drafting running backs in bad offenses. The running backs that I do want to draft in bad offenses need to have pass catching upside. And Tyrone Tracy, being an ex wide receiver, will have that pass catching upside. So I am A-OK drafting him as one of my late round guys.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was going to mention is that pass catching upside. I think that what that does is it kind of carves out a role for Tyrone Tracy early. The only thing that worries me is guys like this, they need to learn how to process a little bit better once they get to the NFL. And hopefully that's something that is being worked out in OTAs and does get worked out throughout training camp and can be worked out as the season goes on. But I think because of the pass catching ability and because of really the lack of weapons on this team, Tyrone Tracy could actually carve out a role early in the season and kind of do a little bit of like what we've always wanted to see from like Antonio
Wandale Robinson.
Gibson. Sure. About Wan'Dale Robinson, if we're going to talk about the Giants, but I mean, we've seen
Yeah.
similar prospect profiles with guys like Antonio Gibson and Tony Pollard, and it's worked out for some of these guys. Maybe not for long, and maybe it's been frustrating, but there is always that potential for a pass catching running back like this when we talk about Tyrone Tracy. All right, I'm going to give you my last guy. And this is a player who, much like Ricky Pearsall, I've been in love with since the first time I turned on the film. And I'm really excited to talk about Ray Davis, running back for the Buffalo Bills. He's one of my favorite running backs from this rookie class. And the Bills have just wanted a player like this for years. They have been going after guys like this over and over and over, whether it was Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette. By the way, all three of those guys, that was just last year that they were trying to get this model of running back. Okay. And so the Bills last year, it's not like we often talk about Josh Allen and how he steals a lot of the goal line carries, and he does, but the Bills running backs as a group actually had 21 carries inside the 5-yard line, which was not bad at all when compared to the rest of the league. Latavius Murray actually had the 12th most carries inside of the 5-yard line. So there's a role here for a guy like Ray Davis. James Cook, really, really bad when it came to the short yardage stuff. He had just 14% of the team's carries inside the 5-yard line. That was 56th amongst running backs with at least 50 carries. So this is not a player that they're going to be turning to when it comes to the goal line. And he had just 2 carries inside the 5-yard line after week 5 when Damian Harris went down. So James Cook, not going to be a reliable guy there. His touchdown rate on carries inside the 5-yard line was 64th out of 65 qualifying running backs. I'm just keep putting it out there. If it's not James Cook in the goal line and they want to move away from Josh Allen continuing to do this, they can look to Ray Davis. Ray Davis is a guy who should not only just have a goal line role early for this team, but he should just have a role for this offense in general as early as week 1. He's really good in pass protection, where James Cook was really, really bad in pass protection. Whatever you might think about it, PFF graded him as the 54th running back out of 57 qualifying running backs in terms of pass pro. So, Dave, you talk about how Pearsall blocks. Ray Davis is also very good at blocking, and that's how you get these guys in the field. So now all of a sudden you talk about a guy who is good enough to be out there on passing downs because he can block well. He's strong enough to be a goal line and short yardage back. And by the way, he's not just this one trick pony. He actually caught plenty of passes in college. He was a top 3 running back in this draft class in terms of targets and receptions in 2023. So listen, it's not just that he can have a role early on in a good offense, but if James Cook is to miss any time, there's actually a good chance that Ray Davis is not a guy that's in some sort of a committee. He becomes a 3-down back, a major handcuff. And honestly, I already think he's kind of in that RB4 territory with massive potential to win you your league.
Yeah, and we kind of got excited last year when Joe Brady took over and we said, "Oh, look at this. Like James Cook is getting creative usage where they're asking him to run these complex routes near the goal lines." And in hindsight, that just tells me that they didn't trust James Cook to take
Yep.
a goal line touch and move the pile. Like they had to find creative ways to get the ball to James Cook near the goal line. And like you said, they've been looking for this guy for years. And you look at the other people on the depth chart, Ty Johnson, Darrynton Evans, they are not going to be taking the goal line work. Obviously, the vulture here is going to be Josh Allen, and that's what we need to get concerned about. But they've got almost $500 million tied up in Josh Allen. They don't want to see him slamming into defenders trying to take his head off near the goal line. They want him doing what Lamar Jackson does and giving the ball to a big running back who can finish the drive there. So I'm in complete agreement with you. Big fan of Ray Davis, and just like Tyrone Tracy, the concern is his age, but that doesn't really matter when we're looking at single year production.
Well, there you go. We talked about 6 different rookies that can break out and honestly be either last round pick or priority waiver wire ads for you just before the season starts. So keep these guys on your radar. If you haven't checked them out, go back and check out the other videos we have done and the other episodes we have done where we talk about rankings, sleepers, rankings, risers, and fallers. We have over 6+ hours of fantasy football content, and we have so much more coming to you guys throughout this offseason. Next episode, we're going to be doing a mock draft with Jagger May and Joey Wright joining us as well before Dave heads off to good old Hawaii. Enjoy it. Make sure you put on sunscreen, Dave. Are you a sunscreen guy? I feel like you're not a
I
sunscreen guy.
am. I am.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
naturally olive skin. I don't burn often, but I like to do it just to be safe.
There you go. There you go. Be safe, Dave. Be safe. But make sure, guys, you are being safe with your fantasy leagues and you're subscribing to the daily news updates from Football Guys, everything that you need to win your leagues and stay safe, as Dave says. It all gets sent straight to your email inbox from Joe Bryant himself. Once again, I want to thank you guys from myself, from Dave. We want to thank you for watching or listening all the way through here. We'll see you next episode where we do the mock draft with Jagger May and Joey Wright. See you next time. Adios.